Hi, everyone. We are live. Thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. We're just going to give it a minute or so for everyone to make their way in. So thanks for your patience. We'll get started shortly, but do appreciate you taking the time to be here with us this Wednesday. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are. And we're just going to give it another minute or so so everyone can make their way in. So thanks for your patience, and we'll get started shortly. So just another few seconds. We'll get started here momentarily. So just giving folks a little bit more time to make their way in, and then we will get going. But like I said, really grateful and excited that you've joined us today for this webinar, and I think can now get started. So with that, my name is Andy Drukarev. I'm on the team here at FOSSA. I'll be your host for today's webinar, and really excited that you've joined us for this discussion on how Kodiak Robotics automates open source management. Before I review our agenda and turn things over to our speakers, Kodiak Robotics Chief Legal and Policy Officer Jordan Coleman and software engineer Dhruv Patel, I have a few housekeeping notes to cover. First, please do feel free to ask any questions you may have in your Bright Talk console. We'll do our best to answer them throughout the presentation, and we will also have a few minutes at the end for a dedicated Q&A if we don't get to everything in the flow of the presentation. Next, this webinar is being recorded. It will be sent out to you after the event. Finally, we at FOSSA will be following up after the webinar with a few additional resources and ways to contact us if you'd like any additional information on using our platform to manage compliance. Now, let's take a look at our agenda for today's webinar. As you'll see, we'll start with some big picture context and background about Kodiak Robotics as a company, as well as how open source is used in the automotive industry. We'll then transition into Kodiak Robotics' specific open source use, including how it uses open source, how it manages license compliance, and some of the processes and tools the company has in place to make license compliance management better. Now, a few words about FOSSA before I hand things over to our speakers. For folks who aren't familiar with FOSSA, we provide technology that helps a variety of organizations reduce risk in their use of open source software. So organizations use our products to identify and address vulnerabilities, generate, import, and manage SBOMs, and then surface and comply with open source software licenses. And that's obviously going to be the focus of today's presentation. So with that, Jordan, would love to hand things over to you for a quick overview of who you are, kind of what you're focused on.
Absolutely. And Andy, thanks so much for having us. Thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about, Kodiak, our partnership with FOSSA, how we utilize open source and build a modern software organization. A little bit quickly about myself. Jordan Coleman, Chief Legal and Policy Officer at Kodiak, handle all things legal, policy, regulatory, comms. I make a mean cup of coffee. I can mop the bathroom if needed. Big believer that there's a lot of great and exciting stuff that needs to get done at Kodiak, and we're all hands on deck. So my background, I spent about a decade as a technology lawyer in Silicon Valley, mostly focused on corporate securities, working for a couple of years at DLA Piper, and then about 8 years at Wilson Sonsini, kind of doing a traditional Silicon Valley mix, working with startups, helping taking companies public, doing a little bit of public company work, and some M&A as well. And about 5 years ago, a little bit more, about 5.5 years ago now, I'm aging myself as my beard shows. I walked into a conference room to meet a young founder with this idea of making 80,000-pound trucks drive themselves. He told me that. I said, that seems pretty cool. I'm happy to help. So I actually was company's outside counsel from pre-formation, formed the company, did their Series C, did their Series A. And then right after the Series A, actually, my wife had our second daughter. You can tell on the slide. Proud father of 3 girls, 3, 5, and 7. So again, you know where that gray hair came from. and left on paternity leave for my second daughter. Came back 6 weeks later and called up Don, our founder, and said, "Hey, it's been 6 weeks. Let me get the download." And about 5 minutes into that call, he said, "And that's why we need a general counsel, and I think you should be that person." I came to the right answer very quickly, which was, I'm really honored, but I have to talk to my wife, which was the easy way off the phone. But in talking to her and thinking through it, I'd come out to Silicon Valley because being a lawyer can be really interesting sometimes, but all the more so when you're working with really cool technology and doing really cool things. And to have a tangible product and something that's going to save lives, help improve the efficiency of the supply chain that touches all of our lives, and otherwise was just such a compelling idea. And so I took the leap, as they say. I actually was lucky enough to join the company. I was employee number 15 or 20, so very early on, and have been here now almost 5 years in-house, helping kind of build all those aspects. And we'll get into it, but there's a very different need to how you ensure compliance with open source when you're a 15-person company and you can see every single software engineer because you're all sitting in the same room versus what it's like 5 years later as a 200-person company. So really excited to have this conversation. And Andy, thanks so much for convening it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan, for that wonderful intro. Now, Dhruv, hand things over to you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Andy. Yeah. So, hey, I'm Dhruv Patel. I'm a software engineer at Kodiak Robotics. And I mostly work on software that doesn't relate to the direct autonomy of the truck. There is a ton of software that goes into outside of the autonomy system of the truck. And our team is a part of, owns all that software, essentially. And we also support other things such as, collaboration with, like, for example, our in-house Counsel to integrate tools like FOSSA into our software and build systems. Yeah, so some of the type of software I work on here is like a visualization software that sort of goes over like the truck's current state and whatnot. Then we have our ingestion software for, ingesting logs once our trucks complete a trip. And yeah, there's a lot of cloud infrastructure set up that's also required in order to, interact with the truck and support our ops teams and whatnot through that software. And yeah, so my overall experience is I'm a full stack developer. I pretty much do everything from front end to back end, cloud infrastructure management, and also I get my hands dirty in DevOps related work. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both for those introductions. Now what I'm going to do is play a brief video to sort of help folks get a better feel for Kodiak and what you all do. About a minute. And Jordan or Dhruv, if you wanted to kind of...
Yeah, happy to do a voiceover. There's actually a pretty cool track with some great music, so I won't do it as well, but maybe just to give a little background on, we've told you who we are, but a little bit more about who Kodiak is. So obviously Kodiak, autonomous vehicle company, focused primarily on the long-haul trucking market. So as you see on the screen, automating Class 8 trucks to up to 80,000-pound trucks to move goods across the United States. We really feel like we are the leaders in this space. We have the industry's largest network, most amount of customers. We have an over 18,000 mile map that we maintain across southern half of the United States, running freight daily between Dallas and Houston, Dallas and Austin, San Antonio, up to Oklahoma City, as well as over to Atlanta. Those are daily operations. We do over 50 commercial deliveries a week with our paying customers, and are utilizing this technology specifically to be brought to bear on this long-haul trucking market, which is an economic existential crisis for this country. Everything moves on trucks. Everything in the room that I'm in, the rooms that Andy and Dhruv are in, everything in the room that you're in have been on at least one truck and probably a lot more. It's an $800 billion a year industry. It represents 4% of the US GDP. And we all know, we expect, whether it's our Amazon packages or whatever else, we expect things to get to us all the faster and all the more reliably and secure. And we don't have enough people who want to drive trucks. There's an 80,000 truck driver shortage in this country. And that's only expected to double by the end of the decade. So this is a growing need and really a place where the only solution is autonomy. In addition, there's over 5,000 vehicular deaths due to large trucks every year on American roadways. We believe that number is acceptable, and we believe autonomous technology can help improve that. And just as importantly, trucks do account for a large amount of emissions. And obviously, I don't think anybody on this call doesn't know about global warming, but anything we can do to help address that. Yes, are we excited about the future of zero emission vehicles? Absolutely. But in the interim, right, while they're not ready for that long haul application, our technology can lead to a 10% fuel emission savings. So just a ton of benefits economically, fulfilling this critical need, helping save lives, helping improving the environment. This is critical technology and one that we need to build. But in order to do so, you need to be able to build it fundamentally secure, but also with the speed of relevance. And I think that's a lot of what this slide will get into. As we know, right, I know it's a old and overworn trope, but software is truly eating the world, and that's no longer just SaaS applications and et cetera. It is industrial applications and things that are on the road every day. It used to be, hey, car companies and trucking companies, they bent metal, the original equipment manufacturers, they bent metal, they dropped in some ICE engines, and the driver drove away. But today, it's really about building software-enabled products, right? Whether that is true autonomy or whether that's the things that make our commutes easier with, Apple Play, Google Play, et cetera. It's really critical in order to be able to build and iterate on software extremely quickly. I think, as it says, engineers are asked to produce modern, agile, and novel software solutions that are easily accessible, but fundamentally need to be protected, and do so without always trying to reinvent the wheel. And that's really where open source software comes in. I think if I were to say to our team, hey, we need to build 100% of our stack in-house and cannot leverage the benefits of open source software, people would look at me sideways like I had a third arm growing out of my head. And that's just not something that we want to do. In order to build modern autonomous software, as well as the offboard and infrastructure and other pieces to it, you need to be able to iterate really quickly, right? We're cutting a new candidate branch of our software on a daily basis. We are constantly iterating on our software. It is the only way to get where we need to be in order to be able to actually put these solutions on roads without a driver and do so fundamentally safely, while also building a solution for our customers, right? Our customers are not looking for technology. They're looking for a robust solution that provides them with all their needs. So whether that is integrations with their transportation management solutions or their yard management solutions or otherwise, you need a full solution that provides them with everything they need. And open source is absolutely mission critical, both to Kodiak as well as autonomy, but also to the broader kind of automotive and industrial world.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jordan, for that overview. I think it's pretty clear at this point that the autonomous trucks and really all vehicles today, it is software does not play a small role. It really is a core part of making all sorts of vehicles function, and of course, autonomous trucking, no exception. And I think, Dhruv, with that, would love if you could speak a little bit to some of the specific ways that Kodiak uses open source, that open source makes all this innovation possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to back up a little, open source itself, when you think of open source software, it's like, why do we use it? And first of all, the first thing that comes to mind is transparency. The software itself, the code is out there for everyone and anyone to review and to review and look at. So yes, open source software may have vulnerabilities that people discover over time and make it better, but it's not something that's going to be readily malicious or something to your system, because the code's out there. You can see the implementation of the software itself. And also, since you could see the code itself, that provides flexibility. You could sort of carve out pieces you need and use it as appropriately to your needs. And it's just efficient overall. Why would you sort of reinvent the wheel and rewrite something that's kind of already out there, that's readily available? With that said, here at Kodiak, we use open source software quite a bit. Just right off the bat, communication protocols. Our trucks run remotely. We need to communicate with them and need to know what the status of the truck is during the trip. So yeah, we have communication protocols in place to communicate with the truck back and forth. And so yeah, we utilize open source software for that. And then, as I mentioned previously, we also have a ton of internal tools, and we need to support that and monitor, make make sure they're always up and cause very minimal downtime. So we use monitoring tools to support all that. So yeah, and I'm sure like you all can name a ton of monitoring tools out there that are open source. So yeah, we utilize we utilize that in that area as well. And also, since when our trucks complete runs, we generate logs and we process all that data to create artifacts that are readily available. And we use open source software to sort of create pipelines of this data ingestion, such as like, I'm sure you all may have heard of like Apache offers a ton of open source software, and we readily use Airflow. And then we got a ton of infrastructure in the cloud. And this gets a little bit difficult to manage if you keep provisioning and maintaining infrastructure like in a manual way. We sort of need to think about it from the perspective of, if this were to go down tomorrow and we need to like recreate this to the exact setup we have right now in the cloud, there's open source technology out there that would sort of let you write that into code, and you'd be able to re-provision your entire setup all over again, exactly what it was. So we use it in that format as well, and we have a ton of internal apps, primarily web apps. So you may have heard of React, a popular open source web development framework. We utilize that very heavily for most of our internal applications. So yeah, there's a ton of open source software being utilized within Kodiak.
Excellent. So I think with that sort of overview of Kodiak, of open source in autonomous vehicles and really the entire automotive industry, a good time to sort of transition into now specifically the license compliance discussion and why Kodiak as a company prioritizes this, why open source license compliance is important to you. And Jordan, as the chief legal and policy officer, I think you have a pretty great perspective on this. So I'd love to turn things over to you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to take credit for my really smart and hardworking team that really does the real work behind the scenes. Listen, I think we all know Silicon Valley has long had this ethos of move fast and break things. And I think that maybe made a lot of sense when it was like, oh no, I'm going to date myself. My HBO Go app is going to crash. Okay, well, you iterated, we'll get it back up. Have a couple of angry consumers, but you'll probably live. And I think, when you think about the fact that we're building 80,000-pound self-driving vehicles that are on roads every single day, moving fast, really important. Not breaking things, really important. And we always need to prioritize safety and trust, right? As we say at Kodiak, safety first and always. That is our number one driving principle. It is both because we fundamentally believe that putting autonomous vehicles on the road is a moral imperative because we need to save lives. But in order to do so, you need to be putting a fundamentally safe and secure solution on the roads. And so, that needs to stretch across the organization, and it needs to include understanding and fulfilling our open source license compliant obligations, right? We need to use the software safely, and we also need to be a good steward of how that software is used and ensuring that we are complying with all licensure and compliance and other obligations. From a commercial standpoint, of course, as any lawyer on this call will know, right? When you get into deep diligence, whether it's for an investment round, whether it's for an acquisition or anything else, one of the areas of focus is going to be on open source and open source compliance. People need to know what they're buying. They need to know, certainly they need to know, it's novel and commercial value, but they also need to know that it is being done and done right. Nobody wants to buy a company and find out, oh, actually everything was built on GPL. We have to, we have to license back huge portions of the code back to the community and et cetera, and that there's huge value leakage because of that. Not to mention, those are not the times to be discovering issues, right? Those are not the times where you say, oh no, here's this major thing. Those are times where you need visibility and you need to move quickly. You don't want these, the last thing you ever want is an open source issue to cause a delay, to lead to huge holdbacks because while you're working through license compliance or otherwise. And so it's really critical. Lastly, and I should have mentioned this on the front end, yes, Kodiak is focused primarily on the long haul trucking market, but we also found great applications for our technology in the defense and national security space. If we think there's a moral imperative to put these trucks on roads to save American lives on American roadways, we think that moral obligation is doubly so to help save the lives of American servicemen and women by keeping them out of some of the most dangerous environments as possible. And while we're extremely proud of that work, obviously the government has a very high bar in terms of maintaining safe and secure software, but also maintaining software transparency. And so another area where FOSSA is able to help superpower our efforts, right? We believe autonomy can be a force multiplier, both on the trucking side and the defense side. And in a lot of ways, FOSSA is an enormous force multiplier for us on the engineering side and on the legal team side.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. And of course, for all of the reasons to prioritize open source license compliance that you covered, it's not always the easiest thing to do, especially when you're talking about manual processes. And I think, as we established earlier, it's not like you're using like one open source package, right? It's done at scale and in quite the large volume. And wondering if you could sort of speak to some of those, Jordan, and sort of what Kodiak's journey was in starting with a manual process to try to understand and manage open source and how that changed over time.
Yeah, great question. Happy to speak to it. So again, as I mentioned, for good and for bad, I have been with Kodiak since the beginning of its journey and joined in-house quite a long time ago. Again, employee 15, 20, which is great because it means either we've done everything right on the legal side, or if we screwed up, there's only one person to blame, and that's me. But one of my first questions when I came on board was saying, hey, just want to make sure we have great hygiene on the software side. Just want to make sure that we're tracking our open source license usage, have checked the relevant licenses, et cetera. And I was extremely excited to hear, yes, of course we are. We know how modern software works. We know how important open source is and how important open source compliance is. What a great start. Okay, great. How are we tracking it? Oh, we got this really handy Google sheet. I will send it to you. Which, again, don't get me wrong, for a 15-person company, made a lot of sense. We all sat in the same room, so it was very easy to collaborate and have those conversations. B, we were a young company, and it was the right way to start. In a lot of ways, the companies will start with QuickBooks and then move to a more robust enterprise-style solution. The same was true here. Now, at the time, what that required is making sure, obviously that list was kept up to date and was thorough and accurate, but also that I, as a lawyer of one, I was a legal department of one for about 3 years, that I was going through and checking all of those open source licenses to ensure that we were using them appropriately, had the right attributions, were mindful of any potential risks from, whether they were, obviously the Apaches, the 3-clause BSDs, some of the MIT, some of the straightforward open source licenses, easy to go. But, any organization, you're going to have engineers who are going to say, hey, I found this great piece of code, but it's a Creative Commons license, or it's a, LGPL, but can we talk about dynamic linking versus static linking, or et cetera. And I think it's all become all the more complicated as well in the world of machine learning and AI as you're thinking about open source data set usage and otherwise. And so, again, that process made sense when we were a 15-person company, but somewhere along the journey to a 200-person company, it no longer did. And I think I can safely speak for any lawyers on the call in addition to myself. Our job, of course, is to protect the company, but it's also to enable our teams in order to be able to develop things and not serve as an unnecessary point of friction or drag on the organization as a whole. And that slow and manual processes, it could cause delays in terms of development. It could cause engineers to say, you know what, instead of waiting for legal, I'm going to go spend 10, 15, 20, 40 hours to build that tool instead of to utilize open source software. And that was not necessarily, I don't even think necessarily is the word. I don't think that was a good usage of their time. And so we needed a way in order to be able to have the legal team enable the software team to continue their rapid development, their rapid iteration in creating a modern software product. And we needed a tool in order to be able to do so. So, it is, we were lucky to get to know the team at FOSSA. We went through a robust process in order to evaluate various available tools. And frankly, that evaluation made it very clear that FOSSA was the company that could provide us with the tools we need today, but just as importantly, to be providing us with the tools that we need tomorrow. Again, we've talked about security, and they have some pretty cool stuff on the security side, stuff that we haven't leveraged yet because we're not shipping a product yet. We're still driving our own technology, and we're still have a safety driver in that cab. But Kodiak is looking to pull the driver next year and looking to put our product in the hands of third parties in 2025, putting it in the hands of kind of private carriers, fleets and private carriers. And so it's critical that we have that line of sight to the robust security audit aspect as well. And we're many months into the journey with FOSSA now, and couldn't be more thrilled with the quality of the partnership.
Excellent. Happy to hear that, of course, as somebody from FOSSA. And would love to sort of dive in now to the inner workings of your open source management program, where, I think it sort of starts with an overall philosophy that open source license compliance is important. And then we obviously have the tooling aspect with FOSSA, but it goes a lot deeper than that. And I know, Jordan and Dhruv, in talking to you, that you've really prioritized making this work for developers. And wondering if you could sort of speak to how you've been able to make that possible.
Yeah, happy to do so. Again, that's kind of the core of our philosophy of what we want to be doing from an open source programmatic perspective. And it's really about that empowerment and enablement. It's about reducing that friction. Again, not to the point of in any way risking compliance, risking organizational rigor, et cetera. And that's really where FOSSA came along, is ensuring that we could have the protections that we need while empowering and enabling our development. So, it is not practical for our CTO and or me or other members of our legal team to go in and have to do a fulsome review of every single open source component or license, right? There was a time, again, before FOSSA where, with 100 engineers, and I'd have, every single engineer slacking me saying, hey, is it okay to use this? Hey, is it okay to use that? It's like, man, I've answered that same question on that same license 100 times now. Hey, I mentioned it at all hands. Why is somebody bringing it up? Oh, well, they were out that day, et cetera, et cetera. And so the ability to have engineers be able to pull in libraries, have FOSSA be able to scan those and automatically approve those where we've set the right permissions, where we've set the right compliance framework, great. But also to either deny, hey, it's a GPL and it's being used in this way, absolutely not. Or flag, hey, this one's a little bit more tricky. This one's a little bit more complicated. I need legal to review. And to be able to have that clarity between the developer and the legal team is fundamentally huge. And so we've integrated FOSSA into our build process, and it allows us to track and manage open source compliance as part of the update process for our stack. And it does so automatically in real time. And again, it fosters speed of development while in no way risking compliance or other requirements. And so, it allows us to prioritize kind of software transparency. It meets our security, our regulatory compliance, our open source license attribution, and otherwise. So again, Dhruv can do the, let's not kid ourselves. I'm very proud of the work that we do as a legal team in Kodiak, but it's all about what our engineers can do, what the product they're creating, what the solution they're creating, and enabling them to do so. And really, FOSSA has put the tools in our hands to be able to do both at the same time, right? Everybody loves to say that walking and chewing gum can be difficult. FOSSA is our cheat code to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, to comply with our open source licenses at the same point in time while building amazing products.
Awesome. So I wanted to drill down into a few of the areas here. And for folks on this presentation, do feel free to submit questions if there's anything that you'd like Jordan or Dhruv to speak to in more detail. But it sounds to me like really one of the major elements to making this all work is having compliance policies that are set up and transparent as far as which open source licenses work for you and which might not. And I'm wondering just sort of what goes into that process for you as far as both, figuring out which licenses you do want to use, you don't want to use, and then even what the process is like if, perhaps there is one on your, maybe list, right, where it's not a clear case of deny or a clear case of approve. In Jordan, did you want to take that one?
Oh, yeah. I think, again, there are two easy sides to our compliance. Again, automated by FOSSA, but still makes life interesting, which is, the automatic slam dunk yeses, the Apaches, the BSDs, the MITs, et cetera. Then there's the automatic slam dunk notes, right? GPL in a production environment, et cetera. I really think it is that kind of third bucket, which is where FOSSA really enables an amazing collaboration between myself and the engineering team. The fact that we do have those permissions and those rules written, where those things are flagged to me, where that conversation can then be had, understanding not only what it is, right? It helps also contextualize how it's being used, where it's being used in the repo, and otherwise. To me, that's a huge part of the value of the tool.
So we have one question that just came in. Which standards or guidelines did you refer to in developing Kodiak's open source management program and related processes? Example, ISO IEC 5230, an NHTSA cybersecurity guideline.
Yeah, again, I would very much love to have our head of security from a cyber perspective, as well as my head of IP and product on the call, to be able to speak to that on a more granular level. But what I can say is it's about that collaboration. I think that's another group that we haven't spoken to, but we have, obviously, given what we're building, a pretty robust security team and cybersecurity team. And so it is about that collaboration between the development and engineering team, the legal team ensuring compliance and otherwise, as well as our cyber team, which is where we ensure that we are checking all the right boxes, looking at the appropriate standards, and building a solution that ensures compliance, not only with the license itself, but to the point raised, also regarding appropriate standards and particularly things that are required by our customers, right? We work with some of the largest shippers, carriers, retailers in the world, and they have very robust compliance requirements. And again, no larger customer on earth than the United States government and the United States Department of Defense. And so ensuring that we check all those boxes is absolutely critical.
Sort of on a related note to that, I'm wondering, Jordan, when you think back to when you first joined Kodiak Robotics, only a handful of people at the company, what advice would you have for organizations that might be now at a similar stage to where you were then, where you're really in the infant stages of building an open source license compliance program? Knowing what you know now, do you have any advice for like the first thing or the first two things organizations early in their license compliance journey should do to set them up for success?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a very clear answer to this, which is to build a culture of compliance, right? In the end, I don't care what the tools you have are. I don't care the processes that you have are. If you don't have buy-in across your organization and you don't have a team that fundamentally believes that compliance is everybody's job, right? At Kodiak, we talk all the time about how safety is absolutely everybody's job at Kodiak, right? It is Dhruv's job, it's my job, it's our driver's job, et cetera. That is so critical to then building that culture of safety within an organization. And again, I think there's just enormous and portable lessons to be learned from that and to be ported over. If you can build that culture for compliance, if your engineers don't see compliance as a burden, but it's something that they're a partner in working with legal to do, I think you're 90% of the way there, right? I think without that, it doesn't matter your tools and you're going to fail. With that, you're going to succeed. It's just a matter of kind of the way in which you architect it. And then again, trying to make sure to continue to remove and reduce friction wherever possible. But to me, it's that culture is the absolute core of building, building the right muscle memory, the right organization around open source compliance.
So we have one more question. Oh, did I cut somebody off? No? Okay. We have one more question, and Dhruv, this one might be for you, actually. Pull in a library sounds like a very easy step in the process, but tech stacks vary. Are you able to expand upon how much the success demonstrated here depends on other tooling or processes?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually very well put, that pulling a library is the easiest part of it. So to sort of build up on that, we were able to integrate FOSSA into our build systems. And, whenever a new library is pulled in, we sort of have this automated job that will kick off and sort of submit information to FOSSA about this library. And the great thing about FOSSA is it allows our legal team to create like custom policies and, sort of specify, this is absolute, like this type of license is absolutely okay, or they could even flag it at a more granular level. Like if they have a whitelisted license, but they know that, oh, this type of open source software with this with the same license can be a little bit difficult. They're able to like sort of control that setting. And as Jordan mentioned, it's not a black and white thing of, hey, this is approved or this is not approved. The great thing about FOSSA is it allows to facilitate that platform of, there are some scenarios where, like we need to dig deeper into and like figure out if this complies with our licensing policies and whatnot. So pretty much when we do pull in a library, we're able to know if, this is like, we're good, or do we need to have a much deeper conversation with our legal team and, make a calculated decision from there.
Excellent. Then I think we can sort of move to this next slide, which is what's going to happen next. We discussed in some detail some of the pillars of your current efforts around managing open source. But, Jordan, as you mentioned, there will be a fundamental shift in how Kodiak is distributing software in the very near future, and wondering if sort of you could speak to some of the foundation that you're laying now to ensure that you're ready for this from a open source risk management standpoint.
Yeah, listen, I think it's a great question. I think in a lot of ways, it thematically goes into what we discussed earlier, right? We're not going to move fast and break things. It's really in this space about measuring twice and cutting once. Sorry, I'm like Mr. Idiom today. But it's really, really critical, right? As we transition from a driver in product to a driver out, when we transition from driver in operations to driver out operations, which, as I mentioned, we plan to do in 2024, we're that much further along in the journey. But really where this becomes critical is as we move into the integration into third-party fleets. That is really when you're going to start seeing that distribution of this software, and where our compliance requirements and our compliance obligations jump up, right? Obviously, we're building in the appropriate notices within our code, but there is that need to list those and to do so publicly. And instead of getting to that point, right, the last thing you'd ever want, and this is any legal department out there, the idea that you get to the point of being ready to ship the product and the team's pumped. And again, for us, that would be starting a journey in early 2018 and then being ready in 2027, 7 years later, to be able to put this product on the roads in the hands of third parties, and for the legal department to say, oh, no, wait a minute, we got to get our open source attributions up, and we got to make sure that those are done. The idea of legal being the blocker there is just unfathomable and something that we just cannot do. If we needed to do it, we would do it, of course, because compliance matters, but that's the work that we're doing today. That's why we've shifted over and started work and been working with FOSSA for, coming up on a year now. It's why we are continuing to build that culture of compliance and do the hard work to be ready for that switchover. That's fundamentally key. In addition, we mentioned it earlier, but the SBOMs that are going to be required from the U.S. government are fundamentally critical, especially as our work with them continues to grow. And then we mentioned it, right? We need to not only build a fundamentally compliant product, but we need to do so build a fundamentally secure product. And so it's the leveraging of that open source vulnerability management on a go forward basis that's going to be really, really critical. It's going to be one of those checks along the way, those fundamentally important checks. Say yes, this is ready. This is ready to be on road without a driver. This is ready to be in the hands of a third party. It's just a fundamentally critical step. And so we're also, right, as we're staying in a development mode, we're able to manage things across a small number of repos. But obviously, as we start thinking about bifurcating code into production code, what's on trucks, et cetera, it's about our ability to track our OSS usage in different ways across different repos. That's going to be fundamentally critical. Because again, and everybody on this call knows this, once you ship a product, it's not like your development work is done. It's not like, the great work that Dhruv and the other engineers on our team has done. They're going to continue to work. They're going to continue to iterate. We're going to continue to improve. And so we need to continue to enable those people to continue to develop our product as well as future products, but also ensure that they're doing so without unreasonable friction. And so we really think FOSSA is the tool for us to grow alongside and grow with. And we think it's going to enable all of this very exciting future for us and, frankly, the autonomy world as a whole.
Excellent. So I think for our final slide, our final topic, we've talked a lot about the processes that have gone into the way you've managed open source and, the importance of creating this developer first culture around open source license compliance. And, wondering if you could sort of speak to some of the high level results, some of what you think are your biggest accomplishments in the open source license compliance realm? And, maybe Dhruv, I'll start with you from your perspective on the engineering team, kind of what you've observed, the positive outcomes of, the program that is in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So for engineering, you heard Jordan go over our previous process, which, as he mentioned, was great when we were a 15-person company. But, as we had more and more engineers, the frequency of new software being included in our stack and whatnot, like, increases. So we can just, Jordan can handle so many Slack messages in a day. So that becomes difficult. And also, I think as our engineers learn our process of adding a new library and making sure our legal team has approved it, sort of adds some overhead, which also you may all know, especially engineers, that every now and then you will also eventually run into a solution where you're looking for a certain solution, and there's more than one open source technologies out there. So when we do run into that, it sort of adds the friction on the engineer to think about, it might be easier to sort of get a quick heads up on what type, also look at the licensing of the software itself to decrease how much legal time will take up to discuss 3 different technologies and get that approved. So I think it sort of gives engineering that freedom to just go out and explore whichever technology makes more sense for the use case on the engineering side, and reduces the overhead by a whole lot, because it's not too long until they are able to find out whether this is compliant with our licensing policies that are managed by the legal team. And as mentioned before, if needed, what we really love about FOSSA is it's not a black and white of this is approved and this is not. It does facilitate that conversation of, okay, let's dig deeper into this use case and how exactly we'll be using this, and make a decision from there.
Awesome. Jordan, from your perspective, kind of curious for, similar question for you, as far as the sort of the outcome, the results of the program, the culture that's been put in place.
Yeah, I think I've touched on a lot of this before, but I wish I could see the crowd's face so I could get a show of hands in terms of how many people have tools that both their legal team likes and their engineering team likes. My guess is that's going to be a pretty darn short list, and I think that's been one of the most rewarding aspects of working with FOSSA, is finding that tool that really does accomplish the needs of both organizations. I think for the most part, it is either legal loves the tool, but it creates friction on the engineering team and they hate it, or engineering loves the tool, but legal really doesn't think that it has the robustness and the compliance aspects that are fundamentally needed for what we need to accomplish. I know for me, it was one of the most important things when I walked into, or forget even just open source compliance, was making sure that the legal team was seen as a strategic partner, as somebody who was going to help people figure out how to get things done, not somebody who's going to help create friction. And you never want to be the department of no as the legal team, even knowing that sometimes you do need to say no as the legal team. And I think FOSSA has only further helped me and my legal team as a whole build and reinforce that culture of we're here to help you get stuff done. We're not here to get in your way. We're not here to make your job harder. We're here to make your job easier while fundamentally protecting the company. It is at the core ethos of everything we do on the Kodiak legal team, and this is a tool that has helped us buttress that. And again, I think that's a pretty significant rarity in a lot of the tools that companies across the valley use. So, and that, kudos to you and your team, Andy.
Thank you. So with that, we're running up against time. We'll leave it open for any other questions folks would like to ask for a few more seconds here. But if not, like I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will be sending out communication to you after this concludes, in that you will see the LinkedIn profiles for both, Dhruv and Jordan. Not to speak for them, but I suspect if you have questions, they would be open to messages and answering them. Yes, hopefully, yes. Okay.
As long as they don't need as quick of a response as our engineering team from me, then we're good to go.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think with that, we will wrap up today's webinar. Just once again, really appreciate first and foremost, Jordan, Dhruv, taking the time to do this and sharing your wonderful insights. I hope that especially organizations that are maybe early on in building a compliance program have learned some things that they can take away back to their own companies. And really appreciate the insights that you shared and sort of what it took to get from tracking licenses manually on a spreadsheet to building this culture where everybody is aligned on the importance of compliance and what it takes to manage it on an ongoing basis. So really appreciate your time and insight, like I said. And then to everyone who was here today, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy Wednesday to be here with us. If you have any additional questions or would like more information about anything we covered today, do feel free to reach out. And with that, I think we can close today's webinar. So thanks again, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks all. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
Good day.